Alrighty, welcome back. Part 2 of the digestive system. So we're going to take the small intestine all the way to the end. So we just finished up with the food in the stomach in part 1. So the small intestine is not called small because of length. It is called small because of diameter. In reality, it is about 20 feet long. So it's really long and it's all wound up and held together in your abdomen. There's 3 parts: the duodenum, the jejunum, and the ileum. The duodenum is the first part that the stomach contents dump into. And then the ileum is the part that hooks up with your large intestine. And yes, there is a valve there, and that valve is also a sphincter. It's called the ileocecal sphincter because it connects the ileum and the cecum, which is the first part of the stomach. So here's the duodenum, the jejunum lines all around there, and then the ileum is this other colored part. So this is all 20 feet worth of intestines. It's wound up in there. This is what it looks like in real life, and you'll notice that there are all kinds of, again, accordion-looking pleats there. In this case, they are called plica. In the stomach, they were called rugae. And in the small intestine, they are called plica, and they're there to increase surface area because as food goes all over these, there's blood vessels in there, and those blood vessels are going to absorb all of the nutrients out of the food that you are eating. So that's plica. Those plica have little projections on them. I call them little spirit fingers, and they are called villi, and they actually just increase surface area. They also have, not only do they have blood vessels in them, they also have a lymphatic capillary called a lacteal. And then these villi have on top of them microvilli. So it's spirit fingers upon spirit fingers. And all of that is to increase surface area so we can get everything possible out of the food that we eat. And it kind of looks like that. So in the small intestine, lots and lots of different things happen. You've got lots of things that are being secreted into the small intestine. And in general, we just call it intestinal juice because its job is to make the chyme even more moist than it is. There's going to be a buffer. We'll talk about that in a minute. Lots of digestive enzymes. There's also, again, more mucus, and this time there are going to be some more hormones that are secreted into the small intestine. So what are those hormones? These are the 4: gastrin, secretin, CCK, you don't need to know all of those long words, and then GIP, gastric inhibitory protein. So we'll talk about these hormones as we go through the process of digestion. What's great about this picture, it might look a little confusing at first, but once you get the general idea of where food is going and follow its route, you can see what is secreted into the food on its way. And here's something that is going to stimulate or make something happen. That's the red arrows. And inhibition means something's going to stop something from happening. And that's the purple or blue line there. Most of digestion takes place in the small intestine. This is also where most absorption takes place. And there are 3 main organs in your body that secrete these digestive enzymes. And that'll be the pancreas, the liver, and the gallbladder. We're going to start with the pancreas. So we say that the pancreas secretes just pancreatic juice. It really is a little more complicated than that, but it's just an easy way of naming what the pancreas secretes into there. Now remember, the pancreas is both an endocrine gland and an exocrine gland, because we've already talked about the fact that, I'll come back to that in a second, the pancreas secretes insulin and glucagon. Remember, and those help regulate blood glucose levels. And there are no ducts. Remember that endocrine is ductless. But it is also an exocrine gland because it has ducts which will take digestive enzymes from the pancreas into the small intestine. It lies just behind the stomach. It's only about 6 inches long and it weighs about 3 ounces. It is I don't know. It's kind of got a weird consistency to it. I always say, to me, it looks like cottage cheese, and it's when we dissect. Well, unfortunately, we won't get to dissect the bigger animals at the end of the year, probably. But when I dissect it, I always try to look for the pancreas, but it's kind of hard to see. It's not a substantial organ like a heart or a liver or a lung. It's a little bit hard to find. And it is one of those organs that we can't transplant yet. We don't know how to do that. They've been practicing, and they've come a long way, but they're just not quite there yet. It would solve a lot of problems for a lot of people if we could learn how to do that. But it's not very big. And here's what it looks like. So it kind of looks like, I don't know, cottage cheese, or I don't know, some other weird food in there. This is what it looks like. You can see the difference in the cells between endocrine and exocrine. So the reason that we call what the pancreas secretes pancreatic juices is just because it has so many different things in it. There's water, there's ions, and then there are 4 major enzymes. Remember, enzymes or proteins are going to speed up the rate of a chemical reaction. So carbohydrases break down carbohydrates. Lipases break down lipids. Proteases break down proteins. Nucleases break down nucleic acids. So we say that pancreatic juice is the most important digestive juice because it has enzymes that break down all 3 major food groups plus nucleic acids. There's a duct that will take that pancreatic juice from the pancreas into the small intestine, right into the duodenum. Right as soon as food enters the small intestine, there is one of those hormones is going to tell the pancreas, hey, look, here comes food. I need some pancreatic juice. And your body will secrete about a quart of pancreatic juice a day. Of course, that varies depending on how much you eat, but it's on average. So as the chyme is coming into that first part of the small intestine, into the duodenum, the first hormone that is secreted is called secretin. And secretin's job is to, it triggers a bicarbonate to be released from the pancreas. So I don't know if you know what a bicarbonate is, but think about this. Remember, we had food, we just had it in the stomach. And remember that acid, that hydrochloric acid is in the stomach, and it makes the contents of the stomach, the chyme, very, very acidic. Well, your stomach is designed to withstand that acid. It's okay, but your small intestine is not. If we did not neutralize that acid when food goes from the stomach into the small intestine, you're going to eat away the small intestine. You're going to get a hole in there, which actually that's what an ulcer is. Most people don't really get ulcers in the stomach. They get them in the small intestine because they're producing too much acid. So your body says, okay, well, I got to neutralize that. Well, that's what bicarbonate is. Baking soda and water is a bicarbonate. Pepto-Bismol is a bicarbonate. Tums is a bicarbonate, and its job is to neutralize the acid so we don't eat a hole in our small intestine. And then CCK is the second hormone that says, okay, we've neutralized that acid. Now we need that amylase and lipase. Amylase is going to break down carbohydrates again. Lipases are going to break down lipids, and proteases are going to break down proteins. And these are just different kinds of proteases. For my purposes, you don't need to know all those, but that's what they all are. They're all enzymes break down proteins. Okay, the second organ that secretes substances into the small intestine is the liver. Your liver is what's referred to as your biggest visceral organ, meaning inside your body. Your largest organ overall, of course, is your skin. But inside your body, it weighs about 3.3 pounds, 2.5% of your body's weight. So littler people have littler livers, and larger people have larger livers. What's interesting about the liver is we've got about 200 known functions. They think there might actually be some more. We don't talk about all those in here. We just talk about a couple of them. But the liver's pretty important. Good news for us is if something happens to your liver, we do know how to transplant livers, and livers will actually regenerate. So if I were to donate part of my liver to you, my liver, if I was compatible with you, my liver inside of you would grow. Now, not to the original 3.3 pound size, but it would get a little bigger, and mine would fill in not quite as much as it was to begin with, but it would grow back. So It's a pretty cool thing about the liver. 4 lobes, what are called right, left, quadrate, and caudate. Looks like this. And then behind the liver on the right lobe is where the gallbladder is. And we'll talk about the gallbladder in just a little bit. You don't need the histology of the liver. We'll skip right back that. Okay, so again, this is exocrine. So the ducts leading from the liver to the small intestine are referred to as bile ducts because bile is what the liver produces. There's common hepatic duct, cystic duct, common bile duct. You don't need to worry about those today. Just know that there's a bunch of ducts that all go together to take bile into the small intestine. So I told you that there are over 200 functions of the liver. Here are the 3 that we think about when we think of the liver. Metabolic regulation, because your liver actually stores nutrients and vitamins, and it can release those nutrients as your body needs them. So if for some reason you're not getting a healthy diet, your liver can actually release some of those into your bloodstream so that the rest of your body can use it. And this is why liver is actually very good for you to eat. Not human liver, mind you, but cow liver. I don't personally like it, but I know a lot of people do, and it's full of a lot of nutrients, very good for you. The other thing that your liver does is when your red blood cells wear out, it will actually remove those old red blood cells and recycle the pieces parts. So the hemoglobin that makes up your red blood cells, your body can recycle that, and also the iron. The part of the liver that deals with what we're talking about right now, though, is number 3, the production of bile. So what exactly is bile? But it's a digestive enzyme whose job is to break down fat. Now, what all does bile contain? It's got a lot of water, it's got ions, it's got a pigment called bilirubin in it, it's got cholesterol, which is actually a good fat, and then it has these things called bile salts. If you had like butter or grease on your fingers and you just tried to rinse it off under the water, you may notice that it's not going away. We need soap, well, because soap is what's called an emulsifier. That's what bile is. It's an emulsifier. It will literally break the fat molecules apart so that you can then rinse them off. Well, these bile salts, think of them as being a little bit gritty, and that helps break the lipid molecules down so that your body can use it, which is a great thing. However, sometimes these bile salts can crystallize. Sorry, I just lost my train of thought there for a second. Well, sometimes they can solidify out, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And instead of being in solution and going from your liver straight into your small intestine, sometimes they can just sit in your gallbladder because your gallbladder actually stores bile for a little bit. So the whole purpose of the gallbladder, let me go back to picture here in a second. The whole picture of the gallbladder is, as your body's constantly making bile. And so your gallbladder right here stores it. So that, let's say you go to McDonald's and you have a Big Mac and French fries and a chocolate milkshake and an apple pie or something. There's an awful lot of fat in that. And so when all of that food goes from your stomach into the small intestine, your body goes, holy cow, that's a lot of fat. I better get a quick burst of some bile to start breaking that down. So your gallbladder is like a syringe, and it squeezes a bunch of bile directly into the small intestine so that that fat can get broken down quickly. And then your liver starts releasing the bile little by little by little by little. So it's a constant stream. Well, sometimes this gallbladder, the bile salts, can solidify in there, and they create what are called gallstones. And so then when the gallbladder contracts and tries to secrete bile into your small intestine, those gallstones will plug up these ducts, and it becomes very painful, and you have to have it removed, which is what I had to do last summer. I had to have that removed. So you can live without it. It's just that people without a gallbladder should kind of watch the amount of fat that they eat. The good news is with our bodies, eventually our liver figures out that we don't have a gallbladder anymore, and it just produces more bile more quickly. So that's what bile does. CCK is the hormone that relaxes that sphincter, again, another ring of muscles, for the gallbladder to secrete those bile salts into, for the gallbladder to secrete the bile into the small intestine. Again, the pigment, bilirubin, this is, I can't remember if we've talked about jaundice or not, but sometimes babies are born jaundice where the whites of their eyes are a little bit yellow because the liver is one of the last organs to develop. Well, bilirubin, what happens is it's not being broken down properly because the liver's not fully functioning, and so babies sometimes will look a little bit yellow. All you got to do is stick the baby under in a little baby tanning bed that they have specially for babies, and that kind of jump starts the liver, and then that bilirubin pigment gets broken down if any of you were born jaundice. Okay. Last but not least, large intestine, again, not named because of length, but named because of diameter. It is larger than in diameter than the small intestine, but it's only about 5 feet long. The whole point of the large intestine is to reabsorb water and some vitamins, specifically vitamin K, which is produced in your large intestine, and you need that for blood clotting. And then this is going to compact your feces so that it's not too watery when you defecate. 3 parts to the large intestine: cecum, colon, and rectum. And so here's the ileum, which is, remember, it's the 3rd part of the small intestine. And so the ileum dumps whatever is left after absorption right here into this first part of the large intestine called the cecum. Right here is that ileocecal valve, the valve between the ileum and the cecum. So this is the cecum. The colon has 3 parts. 4 parts, ascending, going up, transverse, going across, descending, going down, and sigmoid, which is this little bend part right here. And then it ends in the rectum. Notice this little thing right here. That's your appendix. Your appendix is attached to the cecum, and it is about the size and shape of your pinky. Now, it's a vestigial organ. We don't need it. We can live without it. Why is it there? It's left over. It's still in our human genome from some other time in human history when we needed it, thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago. They used to think that it was some kind of a leftover digestive organ because of where it is. What they're thinking now is that they've actually started looking at the tissue a little more, and it actually looks more like lymphatic tissue. So they think maybe it had something to do with your body's immunity and your body's defenses. And in reality, it does actually store some good bacteria in there. So those are the 4 parts. Cecum, and again, that's where the appendix is. There are little pouches in your colon called haustra, and then here are the 4 segments of the colon: ascending, transverse, descending, and sigmoid. Now, the rectum is just for temporary storage of feces, so your sigmoid colon ends in there. After that, it dumps into the anal canal, and then the anus, of course, is the opening. Now, you actually have 2 sphincters around your anal canal and your anus. You have an internal and an external anal sphincter. The internal anal sphincter is involuntary, and it is right here. That's the one you can't control. And then your external anal sphincter is right here, and that's the one you learned to control when you were about 2 years old, or thereabouts, somewhere between 2 and 3 usually. So these are all the things that are absorbed in the large intestine. Mostly it's water, ions, some vitamins, some organic waste, some bile salts. There are some toxins in there, ammonia, any nitrogen-containing compound, hydrogen sulfide. It's what gives feces its rotten egg smell. And then the other thing about your large intestine is this is where you have good bacteria that grow. And right now, there's a lot of information out there about gut health and good bacteria. So, how do you know when it's time to defecate? And yes, defecate does mean poop. Well, what happens is the rectum is usually empty. And when feces move from that sigmoid colon into the rectum and the rectum stretches, you feel what is called the defecation reflex. And that defecation reflex makes those muscles in your anal sphincters relax. And that's what causes it. Again, vitamin K, biotin, and vitamin B5 are the big vitamins that are made in your large intestine and reabsorbed. Okay, so a lot of this stuff I'm just going to skip for now. You can look over it if you want. It just goes into a little more detail about where carbohydrates are digested, proteins, fats, that sort of thing, where they're absorbed and all that. So the last thing is just kind of this. You've got about 9 liters of fluids that go into your digestive tract. So you think about everything you eat in a day, plus any kind of secretions, enzymes and hydrochloric acid and bile and all that kind of stuff. It's about 9 liters of stuff that goes through your digestive tract. 2 of it is water that you've ingested either from drinking or from food, and then 7 liters of it is actually from everything that's secreted into your small intestine in your stomach in order for you to break everything down. These are all the ions that we reabsorb, and then everything but about 150 milliliters is absorbed by osmosis. So really, about 150 milliliters is what you should excrete a day. Everything else should really be absorbed. And age-related changes, as always, thinner, more fragile epithelium in your digestive tract. That's what causes hemorrhoids. Weaker peristaltic contraction, which means that food's not moving as quickly through your digestive tract, which unfortunately will cause constipation in older people because they're not getting it out of their body fast enough. And that is it.